The space station called Nexus Prime burned. Bright flashes lit up the darkness outside its thick windows like silent fireworks. Inside, the air tasted of smoke and fear. People ran through the corridors, their faces pale. Soldiers in blue uniforms, part of the group called the Concord, tried to hold the doors against attackers they couldn't stop. For 200 years, the Concord had fought a terrible war against the Stygian Empire. The Concord was made up of many different groups who just wanted to live in peace. The Stygian Empire was different. Ruled by a powerful woman named Queen Lysandra, it wanted to control everything. Her armies, led by tough men like Baron Silas and General Marcus, crushed anyone who stood in their way. They were winning now. Nexus Prime was the Concord's last big stronghold. If it fell, the Concord was finished. Far away, watching everything on huge screens, sat Admiral Grace Ford. She was in charge of Earth's space fleet, the United Earth Command, UEC. Her face was calm, but her eyes were sharp, taking in every detail of the destruction. Next to her stood a man named Eli Brooks. He wore a torn Concord uniform. He wasn't a soldier anymore, just someone trying to help talk between the Concord and Earth. Eli had fought the Stygians for years. He looked tired, and a fresh cut bled slowly on his cheek. "Admiral Ford," Eli said, his voice rough. "Please." "They won't last much longer. Hours, maybe less, without help. ... Everyone on Nexus Prime dies. Then the Stygians roll over the rest of Concord space. Billions more." He pointed a shaky finger at the screen showing a Stygian warship, black and sharp like a knife, firing again at the station. Grace didn't look away from the screen. She knew the history. While the Concord and the Stygians had been fighting their endless war, humanity on Earth had stayed out of it. Neutral, they hadn't been lazy though. While others fought, humans had worked. They built better ships, smarter machines, faster ways to talk across space. They watched, learned, and prepared, hidden away. They called their secret project Aegis. "Why now, Captain Brooks?" Grace asked quietly. "Why ask us to break centuries of silence? We watched your war grind on. We saw the suffering. Because there's no one else left to ask." Eli slammed his fist on the console, making the image flicker. "The Concord is broken. The Stygians... ... Lysandra, she doesn't just want to win. She wants to wipe out everyone who isn't hers. She calls it purification. If Nexus Prime falls, Earth won't be safe forever either. She knows about you. She'll come." As if she heard him, the main screen changed. The image of the battle vanished, replaced by the face of a woman. She was beautiful, with sharp features and cold, dark eyes. Her hair was like black silk, and she wore a crown of twisted metal. This was Queen Lysandra. She sat on a throne that looked like it was made from bones and dark steel. Behind her stood two men. One was thin and looked clever, Baron Silas. The other was big and looked angry, General Marcus. "People of Nexus Prime." Lysandra's voice was smooth as ice, filling the command center. "Your pathetic resistance amuses me for a moment. But the game ends. Surrender now. Bow to the Stygian Empire. Accept my rule, or be erased from existence. Your choice is simple. Kneel or burn." She smiled, a chilling thing with no warmth. And to those watching from their distant, quiet world, your time of hiding is over. The storm is coming. The screen went dark, back to the battle. Silence hung heavy in the room. Eli looked sick. That's her ultimatum, that's the end. Grace finally turned from the screens. She looked at Eli, then at the other officers in the room. Their faces were tense, waiting. She pressed a button on her chair. "Open a channel to Nexus Prime Command," she ordered. Her voice was clear and strong, cutting through the fear. A moment later, the tired, desperate face of the Concord commander appeared. "This is Admiral Grace Ford, United Earth Command," she stated. "We have heard your request. We have heard Queen Lysandra's declaration." The Concord commander's eyes widened slightly. "Admiral Ford, does this mean?" Grace held up a hand. "Humanity will join this fight. We will save Nexus Prime." Relief washed over the commander's face, followed by confusion. "But ... your terms? What do you require?" Grace leaned forward slightly. Her gaze was steady, unblinking. "One condition. Total control. From this moment until the threat is ended, every soldier, every ship, every decision, belongs to me. To Earth Command, you will follow our orders without question. Do you agree? The commander hesitated only for a second. He looked at the destruction raging behind him on his own screens. He had no choice. Yes, he breathed. We agree. Anything. Just help us. Grace nodded once. Then it is done. She closed the channel and turned to her own officers. All eyes were on her. Lee Brooks watched, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. Grace took a deep breath. The weight of centuries of waiting, of preparation, settled on her shoulders. Signal the fleet, she commanded, her voice ringing with authority. Project Aegis is activated. All units prepare for immediate deployment. Destination: Nexus Prime. She paused, looking at the countdown clock on the main screen, showing the station's estimated survival time. Set mission parameters. Objective: end the Stygian Empire's assault. Time limit. A faint, determined smile touched her lips. The space near Nexus Prime seemed to tear open, not with a loud bang, but with a sudden silent ripple like a stone dropped into a still pond. Out of these ripples, ships emerged. Not the bulky, scarred warships of the Concord or the sharp, menacing blades of the Stygian Empire. These were different. Sleek, almost black, they seemed to drink in the light around them. They moved with a quiet purpose, forming up quickly. At their center was a larger vessel, strong and steady, the UEC Dauntless. Admiral Grace Ford stood on its bridge watching the screens. On Nexus Prime, the Concord defenders saw the new ships. A shaky voice came over Grace's communication link. Admiral Ford, is that Earth's fleet? It was the Concord commander, his voice thick with desperate hope. It is, Grace replied calmly. Hold your positions. Do not fire unless fired upon. Follow my orders exactly. She turned to a young officer sitting at a complex console. Ensign Leo Vance status. All Aegis units report ready, Admiral, Vance said, his fingers flying over the controls. Warlock is online and connected. Quantum entanglement comms are stable. Nighthawk's stealth frigates are deploying as planned. A new image flashed onto the main screen, Queen Lysandra. She looked amused, her dark eyes fixed on Grace. Behind her stood Baron Silas and General Marcus. Admiral Ford? Lysandra purred, her voice smooth and cold. The quiet little earth mice finally poked their noses out of their hole. How? Quaint. Did you come to watch the galaxy burn? Or perhaps to beg for mercy before we sweep your world clean? Grace met the Queen's gaze without flinching. We came to end this, Lysandra. Stand down your forces. Withdraw from Concord space. Now. Lysandra laughed, a sound like breaking glass. End this? With these ... toys? She gestured dismissively towards the Earth ships visible on her own screen. Baron Silas, show these insects what happens when they join a thunderstorm. Crush them. Make it slow. On the screen, Baron Silas, a thin man with a cruel smile, bowed. With pleasure, my queen. The image cut out. Ensign Vance, Grace said, her voice still calm. Initiate Operation Midnight? Phase 1? Authorize Warlock. Vance tapped a final key. Warlock engaged. Admiral. Running intrusion protocols. Now. Nothing seemed to happen at first. The Stygian warships, huge and menacing, surged forward towards the smaller Earth fleet and the battered Nexus Prime. Baron Silas's flagship led the charge. Then, strange things began to happen among the Stygian ships. Lights flickered across their dark hulls. Some ships suddenly veered off course, bumping clumsily into each other. Others slowed down, their engines sputtering. Bright blue shields, which had protected them from Concord weapons, flickered wildly and then vanished. Panicked voices started flooding the Stygian communication channels. What's happening? Silas's voice crackled over an intercepted transmission. Shields down, engine control is failing. My weapons won't target. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Vance watched his screens. Warlock reports successful intrusion. Admiral, we have control of primary Stygian ship systems. Network compromised. Shields disabled. Weapons offline on 70% of their lead vessels. Turning their drones against them now. Grace nodded. She watched as Silas's flagship, now vulnerable, drifted slightly off course. Smaller drone ships meant to attack the Earth fleet instead spun wildly, firing harmless shots into empty space, or even turning their guns on other Stygian ships. Confusion spread through the attacking force like a wave. Captain Eli Brooks, standing near Grace, let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. "They look like they're falling apart," he muttered, amazed. "They are," Grace said simply. "They built their empire on force and fear. Their systems are strong, but rigid. Predictable." Warlock found the cracks and poured itself in. On the main screen, the image of Queen Lysandra suddenly reappeared. The amusement was gone, replaced by icy fury. Her perfect composure was cracked. "What trickery is this, Earthwoman?" she spat. "What cowardly magic?" "No magic, Lysandra," Grace replied. "Just preparation. While you waged your war for 2 centuries, we studied, we learned, built better tools. You rely on strength, you rely on intelligence. Stand down." Lysandra's eyes burned. "Never you think disabling a few ships stops the Stygian tide? General Marcus, send in the reserves, overwhelm them, drown them in steel and fire. Destroy their flagship." The screen went dark again. Grace knew the first shock was over. The Stygians wouldn't give up easily. Aaron Silas's crippled vanguard was still drifting, but fresh waves of Stygian warships, perhaps less networked, but still heavily armed, began moving forward from the rear of their massive fleet. The clock was ticking. Phase 1 complete, Grace announced. "Captain Brooks, prepare your Concord forces. Phase 2 begins now. Ensign Vance, signal the Nighthawks. It's time to draw them into the storm." She glanced at the mission clock prominently displayed. It read 14:05 Galactic Standard Time. 4 hours and 55 minutes remained. The Stygian fleet, battered but still huge, pushed forward. Now new waves of warships, less fancy than the first ones, but heavy with guns, moved past Baron Silas's crippled vanguard. They aimed straight for the UEC Dauntless and the small Earth fleet. General Marcus, a big man with a face like thunder, glared from his own command ship. He wanted a fight, a crushing blow. Admiral Grace Ford watched them come. "Captain Brooks," she said, her voice clear over the communication link to Nexus Prime. "It's time. Phase 2. Draw them into the dust cloud." Eli Brooks, on the bridge of a damaged Concorde cruiser, wiped sweat from his forehead. His ship was hurt, but it could still fly. Around him, other Concorde ships, survivors of the long battle, powered up their engines. They looked weak and beaten. "Understood, Admiral," Eli replied. "All right, Concorde ships, follow me. Hit them hard, and then run like the devil is on your tail. Head straight for the Veil Nebula." The Veil Nebula was a huge, swirling cloud of gas and dust nearby, lit faintly by distant stars. It was hard to see inside. Eli's cruiser, along with a dozen other limping Concorde vessels, suddenly surged forward. They fired wildly at the oncoming Stygian reserves. Their shots were weak, mostly bouncing off the Stygian armor. It looked desperate, foolish even. General Marcus saw it on his screen. He slammed a meaty fist down. "Ha! The weaklings try one last charge. Pathetic. Ignore the little Earth ships for now. Focus fire. But destroy those Concorde rats before they escape. Chase them into that dust cloud. Show them no mercy." He wanted a quick, brutal victory over the enemies he knew. The Stygian reserve fleet changed course. Like a pack of wolves spotting wounded prey, they turned away from the Dauntless and Earth fleet. Their big guns fired, sending bright bolts of energy tearing after Eli's fleeing ships. The Concorde vessels ducked and weaved, some taking hits, trailing smoke as they plunged into the thick, colorful haze of the nebula. The Stygians followed eagerly, disappearing into the swirling dust after them. Inside the nebula, visibility dropped to almost nothing. Sensors became fuzzy and confused. The Stygian ships slowed down, searching for the Concorde ships they were sure they had cornered. "Where are they?" Marcus growled, peering at his fuzzy screens. "Find them? Light up this dust cloud." Back near Nexus Prime, Admiral Grace watched the main Stygian force vanish into the nebula. A small group of ships, including General Marcus's command ship, stayed just outside, watching the Dauntless. "Ensign Vons," Grace said. "Signal the Shadow Wings. The trap is set." Silently like ghosts, ships appeared. They hadn't been there a moment before. These were the Nighthawk-class stealth frigates, small, incredibly hard to see, shaped like sharp black arrows. They had moved quietly while everyone was watching the chase. Now they positioned themselves right at the edge of the nebula, hidden by the dust, facing the backs of the Stygian ships that had chased Eli inside. Shadow Wing Leader 2 Dauntless, a calm voice came over Grace's speaker. "We are in position. Targets locked. Execute," Grace ordered. The Nighthawk ships didn't fire big guns. Instead, they launched special torpedoes. These torpedoes didn't explode. They flew silently through the nebula dust, homing in on the engines of the Stygian warships hunting for Eli. Inside the nebula, chaos erupted for the Stygians. Warning lights flashed on ship after ship. Engine failure, complete shutdown, power core offline, we're dead in space. What hit us? I see nothing. The special torpedoes had hit. They sent out powerful pulses of energy, like a giant invisible hand slapping the ships. They didn't blow them up, just turned everything off. Stygian engines died. Weapons went cold. Lights flickered out. One by one, the mighty warships that had chased Eli became dark. Silent hulks, helplessly drifting in the colorful dust. Eli Brooks watched from his hiding spot deeper in the nebula. He saw the Stygian ships suddenly stop, their lights going dark. A grin spread across his tired face. It worked, he breathed. They took the bait. Outside the nebula, General Marcus saw the disaster unfold on his flickering sensors. Dozens of his reserve ships, trapped inside the dust cloud, had just gone silent and dark. "No," he roared, his face purple with rage. "What treachery is this? Cowards, face me properly." He pounded his console. "On the Dauntless," Ensign Vance reported. "Phase 2 complete, Admiral. 70% of the Stygian reserve fleet is immobilized inside the nebula. Minimal Concord losses. Shadow Wings report successful disengagement." Grace nodded. 2 hours had passed since they arrived. Half the Stygian fleet was crippled, without a single Earth ship being destroyed. But the biggest threat remained. Queen Lyssandra's personal flagship, the massive Iron Crown, floated menacingly near Nexus Prime, guarded by its own powerful group of ships. And General Marcus, furious and humiliated, was turning his remaining ships and his own command vessel towards the Dauntless for a direct attack. On the screen of the Iron Crown's throne room, Queen Lysandra watched the reports. Her beautiful face was tight with fury. Her knuckles were white on the arms of her dark throne. Baron Silas had failed. Now Marcus was failing. This quiet little Earth fleet was dismantling her unstoppable war machine piece by piece. "Enough," she hissed, her voice like frozen venom. "Marcus, forget the rules. Forget capturing them. Bring me the head of that Earth Admiral. Turn her ship into space dust." Now, she pointed a sharp finger at the image of the Dauntless and ready the hammer. Target ... Earth. Behind her, technicians scrambled at a large, dangerous-looking console. The real fight was just beginning. General Marcus roared orders. His remaining ships, thick with armor and heavy guns, turned towards the UEC Dauntless. They charged, firing huge blasts of energy. Bright beams sliced through space, forcing Admiral Grace Ford's ship to dodge and weave. Shields flared bright blue as hits landed, shaking the deck. The Dauntless fired back, smaller but faster, its shots precise, chipping away at Marcus's ships. It was a fierce, noisy dance of destruction. But Grace knew this fight was just a distraction. The real danger was the Iron Crown, Queen Lysandra's massive flagship. It hung back a dark mountain of metal near Nexus Prime. Suddenly, a low, powerful hum started vibrating through space. It was felt more than heard, even inside the Dauntless. A huge section on the front of the Iron Crown began to glow with a deep, angry red light. It was building power. "Admiral," Denson Vance yelled, his voice tight. Massive energy spike from the Iron Crown. Readings match. It's a planet killer weapon. They're charging it. Target lock ... It's Earth. Captain Eli Brooks's face appeared on a screen, pale and shocked. Lysandra's activating the hammer. She's insane. She'll destroy Earth. Grace felt cold. They were out of time for clever tricks. Phase 3, she commanded, her voice cutting through the noise of battle. Sergeant Cole, Lieutenant Ross, go now. Deep inside the Dauntless, in a dimly lit launch bay, Sergeant Nate Cole tightened the straps on his combat armor. He was a solid man, calm under fire. Next to him, checking her weapon, was Lieutenant Maya Ross, sharp-eyed and quick. Around them stood 20 other Marines, faces grim. Her mission: board the Iron Crown. Listen up, Nate barked. We hit hard, we hit fast. Ross, your team takes the engine room. Shut down that hammer at the source. My team goes straight for the Queen. No mistakes. We get this done. Maya nodded firmly. Small, dart-like ships, painted dark and hard to see, shot out from the Dauntless. They flew low and fast, dodging the battle between Marcus and Grace. They headed straight for the huge, almost careless shape of the Iron Crown. The Queen ship, focused on charging its terrible weapon, didn't see the tiny specks approaching until it was too late. The boarding pod slammed into the Iron Crown's thick hull like metal ticks, latching on. Cutting tools flared, opening holes. Nate Cole was the first through, his rifle ready. The corridor beyond was dark and strangely quiet. Then red lights flashed and alarms screamed. Heavy footsteps pounded towards them. Guards. Not ordinary soldiers, but large men fused with metal parts, their eyes glowing red. Cyborgs. Contact, Nate yelled. Lasers flashed. Nate's Marines fired back, ducking behind corners. The cyborgs were tough, shrugging off hits. One charged, its metal fist swinging. Nate dodged and fired point-blank into its chest. It stumbled, sparks flying. Keep moving. Towards the throne room, Nate ordered, pushing forward through the smoke and noise. The fight was brutal, corridor by corridor. Meanwhile, Maya Ross and her team ran in a different direction, deeper into the ship. Their target was the main engine room and the power core feeding the hammer. They met resistance, too. More cyborg guards and human soldiers loyal to the Queen. Maya moved like lightning, firing, ducking, leading her team through confusing passageways marked with strange symbols. They burst into a huge, hot room filled with roaring engines and giant pipes. Technicians in black uniforms scattered. Standing near a large control panel was Baron Silas, his thin face twisted in panic. Stop them. Protect the core, he shrieked. Maya didn't hesitate. She fired a precise shot that knocked the weapon from Silas's hand. Two Marines grabbed him, pulling his arms behind his back. Shut down the power feed to the hammer weapon. Now. Maya shouted at the terrified technicians, pointing her rifle at the main console. One technician, shaking, looked at Silas, then at Maya's fierce eyes. He slammed his hand on a switch. The deep hum coming from the ship faltered, then dropped in pitch. The angry red glow on the weapon outside flickered. On the bridge of the Dauntless, Vance reported, hammer power levels dropping. Still charged enough to fire, but the core feed is interrupted. It won't hold long. In the throne room, Queen Lysandra felt the vibration lessen. She saw the status lights on her weapon console flicker to amber. Fury exploded on her face. She saw Nate Cole's team fighting their way through her last cyborg guards just outside the grand doors. No, she screamed. She whirled to a control panel on her throne. You think you've won, Earthwoman? You haven't. If I can't purify Earth, I will erase it. Fire the hammer. Fire IT now. The final desperate technician obeyed. The deep hum surged back violently. The red glow on the weapon flared brighter than ever, building towards release. It was aimed straight at distant Earth. Admiral Grace Ford saw the terrible glow. She saw the boarding teams hadn't stopped it in time. She saw General Marcus's ship still pounding the Dauntless. There was only one thing left to do. It was a terrible choice. Helm, Grace said, her voice suddenly very quiet but clear. Full power. Set collision course. Target the hammer weapon array on the Iron Crown. Brace for impact. She looked at the image of her home planet on the screen. For Earth, the Dauntless, already damaged, turned sharply away from Marcus's fleet. It ignored the shots hitting it. Engines blazing, it flew like a spear. Straight towards the heart of the glowing red weapon on the Iron Crown. The UEC Dauntless flew like a bullet, ignored the shots hitting it from General Marcus's ships. Its engines burned bright white, pushing it faster and faster. It aimed straight for the huge, glowing red weapon on the front of Queen Lysandra's ship. The Iron Crown. Inside the Iron Crown, everything shook violently. The deep hum of the hammer weapon became a painful scream. Sergeant Nate Cole and his Marines, fighting near the throne room doors, were thrown to the floor. Metal groaned and crunched like a giant can being crushed. Lights flickered wildly. Alarms wailed. "What was that?" yelled one Marine, picking himself up. Nate looked towards the front of the ship. "The Admiral," he said grimly. "She just hit them." He pushed himself up. "Move, now, to the Queen." The blast doors to the throne room were cracked open from the impact. Nate charged through, his Marines right behind him.
Yes.
The room was chaos. Smoke filled the air. Panicked technicians ran around. Queen Lysandra was trying to stand up near her throne, her fine clothes torn, her face smudged with dirt. Baron Silas was nowhere to be seen. Two large cyborg guards stumbled, trying to get their balance. Nate didn't hesitate. "Secure the Queen," he ordered. His Marines rushed the guards, knocking them down. Nate ran straight at Lysandra. She saw him coming, her eyes wide with shock and fury. She reached for a small weapon hidden in her throne. Nate was faster. He grabbed her arm firmly and shoved her away from the throne. Another Marine quickly pulled her arms behind her back, putting strong cuffs on her wrists. "You dare touch me," Lysandra shrieked, struggling uselessly. "I am your queen."
What?
"Not anymore," Nate said flatly. "You're finished." Down in the engine room, Lieutenant Maya Ross heard the massive crunch and felt the ship lurch. Red warning lights flashed everywhere. Deep hum of the hammer weapon suddenly choked and died. The glowing lights on the main console went dark. Maya looked at the terrified technicians. "Is it dead?" she demanded. One technician, shaking, nodded. "Yes, the weapon. The impact... ... It's destroyed. The core is shutting down." On the bridge of the Dauntless, it was dark and broken. Sparks flew from cracked screens. Smoke hung in the air. Admiral Graceford pulled herself up from the floor. Her uniform was torn, and a cut bled on her forehead. The front view was a mess of twisted metal. They were buried deep in the wreckage of the Iron Crown S weapon array. But Earth on the screen was still there, safe. The hammer was broken. Port Grace coughed, her voice rough. Ensign Vance, blood trickling from his nose, worked at a cracked console. "Dauntless is... ... heavily damaged, Admiral. Engines dead. Life support failing. But... Iron Crown weapon system destroyed," Sergeant Cole reports. "Queen Lysandra captured." Grace nodded, pain shooting through her side. "Open a fleet-wide channel. Broadcast the Queen's image." Vance worked quickly. Soon an image filled every screen in the battle zone. Queen Lysandra, held firmly by Nate Cole, looking furious and defeated. "This is Admiral Graceford," Grace announced, her voice echoing weakly but clearly across space. "Queen Lysandra is captured. The hammer is destroyed. The Stygian Empire's attack is over. All Stygian forces stand down immediately. Surrender your weapons. The war ends now." Silence fell over the battlefield. The shooting stopped. Stygian ships hung motionless. On his command ship, General Marcus stared at the screen showing his captured queen. His face was purple with rage. "No," he roared. "This is a trick. Ignore the order. Fire. Fire on the Dauntless. Fire on everything." He turned to his weapons officer. "Do it. Destroy them." But the weapons officer just stared blankly at his dark screens. All around Marcus, consoles were going dark. Soldiers looked confused. Guards near Marcus suddenly turned, their weapons pointing not outwards but at him. "What is this?" Marcus yelled, stumbling back. A calm, electronic voice spoke from the ship's speakers. "General Marcus, your command authority is revoked. This vessel is under control of Warlock. Stand down. You are under arrest." Marcus's own guards grabbed his arms. He struggled, but it was useless. Across the fleet, the same thing happened. Ships powered down, weapons went cold, Stygian soldiers surrendered. On Nexus Prime, cheers erupted. People hugged each other, crying with relief. Captain Eli Brooks quickly got a small shuttle ready. He flew it over the broken battlefield towards the wrecked front of the Iron Crown. Where the Dauntless was stuck like a spear, found Grace on the broken bridge, sitting in her command chair. Vance was helping her. The mission clock behind them showed 1850 Galactic Standard Time. 5 hours. Exactly. Eli walked up to her, his eyes wide. The impossible had happened. "Admiral," he said, his voice filled with awe. How? How did you do this in just 5 hours?" Grace looked tired, but a small, satisfied smile touched her lips. She looked past Eli, through a cracked window. Beyond the smoke and broken metal, the view was clearing. And there, rising over the curve of the planet below, was a bright, beautiful blue and green orb. Earth. "We didn't fight their war, Captain Brooks," Grace said softly, her eyes fixed on their home. "We ended it." The long, bloody fight between the Concord and the Stygian Empire was over. Humanity, silent for centuries, had stepped onto the stage and changed everything in a single afternoon. A new peace began, guarded by those who had finally chosen to join the fight.